Hi everyone. So just a quick sort of introduction about what's going to happen. There are a couple of panelists that will be joining us in a couple of minutes, and I'll admit them as they arrive. In terms of order, so you might be able to see everybody on the screen. I guess most of the panelists have all got their camera on, so hopefully you can see the panelists if you put it on gallery view. So we've got two panelists from each inn. So as you're probably aware, there are 4 inns: Middle, Lincoln's, Grays and Inner Temple. You will likely be applying for scholarships. So if you're in your final year at university, now is the time to be applying for a scholarship if you want to start the bar course next year. The deadline for scholarship applications is the 5th of November. I think it's the same across the board. If you haven't started your application, I definitely would have a look at the INN's websites. Just briefly, what will happen is that each of the panelists will give an introduction. They will tell you what scholarship they obtained, and then they will go on to give you some tips in terms of application and also the interview process based on what they went through when they applied quite recently. There will also be an opportunity to ask questions. What I will say is that if you can answer questions in the chat box, and then either we will ask questions of the panelists either at the end or as we go through. And also, if there are specific questions for panelists and you're not speaking, if you wouldn't mind just answering a few of them in the chat as well, that might be useful just to make sure that we can answer as many as possible. Hopefully we'll get through everybody's questions, but if not, I'm sure you can either contact myself or the panelists directly, and they'll be happy to help. This is being recorded. I think all of the panelists have either told me that they're happy or they've not responded. So if you're not happy, please speak now. If you're participating and you're answering questions or whatever, just be aware that they are obviously going to be recorded as well. And if you want to turn your camera off because you don't want to be recorded, then please feel free to do so. What we will do first of all is we will start with people that have applied to Middle Temple, and then we'll go through each of the inns in turn. And obviously you can ask your questions as and when you wish. You might not know where you want to apply yet, and that's absolutely fine. But obviously you do need to start thinking about it fairly soon. And my advice is that everybody should apply for a scholarship, even if you think that you're not going to get it, or you might not think that you financially need it. Please, please, please still apply. That's what they're there for. And I hope you enjoy the session. So we'll start with Michelle first, if that's okay, because you're on the top of my screen.
Yeah, so I'm the first one up. Hello, everybody. And thank you, Paige, for this event as well, inviting us here for the panel. I'm a City Law School student. I'm actually a part-time bar student. So I applied for my scholarship, I'd say back last year, I think, when the applications were going on. And I was very, very lucky to get the Queen Mother Scholarship from Middle Temple. And because I was part-time, I was able to apply 2 years in a row. And that's a good thing about being part-time. You can apply twice. And actually, the first time when I applied for Inner Temple, and I didn't get it, to be honest, for the first time, because it is very tough. And, you know, one thing that you do need to know is that as well, you know, you're not going to kind of get it first time, and if you are a part-timer, so it's best to try again. And at the end of the day, I think my advantage was that because I had already started the BVS program, I know they're all different names now, but former BPTC. And I started that at City in 2020, if I believe, yeah, 2020, so it was last year, September. I was able to kind of already start my year within the bar course and then go for the interview, which I believe was this year, March. So it was quite a eye-opener for me, and I think a good advantage for me that I had already started the bar course, and I was able to then therefore translate my experience from the bar course as well and know what they were exactly looking for. But I think it was really good to have that first experience in the interview, and everybody will be nervous when you go there, and at the end of the day it's about kind of like, if you can keep your cool a bit, but also just be yourself. And that's really important. If you can be yourself, remain confident and sure of what you're doing. And in terms of, I'd say for me, the big thing for me I'm a mum as well, I'm a mother. And not only am I a mother, I've got family, I have responsibilities, I work as well. And it's really good about being straightforward with everybody in the interview and just telling them your story and where you're coming from. And I'd say a tip for you as well, a good tip would be, when they ask you the big question, because they'll always ask you this question, why do you want to be a barrister? It's like, everyone knows when they say, oh, what question do you ask? The why do you want to be a barrister is a really loaded question, because it might seem simple, but it's actually a really loaded question, because they want to know what inspired you. So it's behind that question is like, what's inspired you to be a barrister? What happened in your life that created your spark to be a barrister? And what is your passion? What is your commitment to being a barrister? And what do you want to do in this field? And what kind of name or niche do you want to go into? And why do you want to do that? And so what I kind of said to them, for me, it was very much about my life experience. In coming into this world and being a barrister, because I started much later in life. I won't say my age, but I'm a mature student, right? So I'll be giving too much away. But basically, yeah, I started later on in life. So I had already had a career before coming into the bar. And I decided to change my career because it was time to, and I always wanted to be a barrister, but also the things I saw in my career, I worked in public health, and the things I saw in public health and, kind of created a spark for me to want to change or to want to be a part of what we could do better in this world in the UK and internationally as well. And also, growing up, I grew up as working class. I literally saw my parents graft from a very young age, and I saw a lot of unequal opportunities kind of, come across them. And, for me, it was about fairness, it was about justice. And I was always the one sticking up for my family with things, and they didn't really know the system. So I would always go down to the town hall and write the letters for their council tax issues and and all that stuff, trying to put my mum in jail for tax when she did pay, so things like that. It's not nice to watch a 60-year-old mum, going off to jail. So it's like, literally, I was like that from a teenager up until now. And so the bar was definitely for me. So I'd say a good tip, apart from, just being yourself and telling them where you're coming from, because they can tell, they're barristers on the panel. There's like 3 barristers that interview you. Like, they could tell when you're being yourself or not as well. And at the end of the day, I engaged like little techniques in the background. The STAR, I don't know if you know the STAR approach, in terms of situation, task, action, and result. So I would explain a situation to them that I encountered, such as there was one day I was working in the legal advice clinic. I came across a lady that was very uncomfortable with giving over her information. And obviously, you need to give over your information in order for us to help you. So she didn't really trust everyone there, because there was about 3 of us staff around her. And so what happened, we all went out of the room after. We tried to do our best when we were doing the research for her. And they asked me if I could go back in and just talk to her, like woman to woman, whatever, on that level. So I went back in, because I've been through stuff like that. My parents had as well. They had disabilities and claims and things that I had to sort out with them. So I related to it. It's about having your own relatable experience as well and relating it to your client. So I went down and I spoke to her, and that was my situation. That was my task. And my task was just to relate and make her feel comfortable and let her know that this information is going nowhere. And it's going to be kept within the centre. It's private, don't worry. So I went and I did that, and that was the action of it. And then obviously the result was that she got the help that she needed. And in the end, she managed to have her claim increased. I think it was a PIP claim or DLA claim. But it was good to explain this to my panelists, and they wanted to see each stage of how you think. So it's about how your thought process is within that stage. So they gauge that with you as well. And in terms of another tip I would say would be memory refreshing. Just like this is something we also look at in the bar when we're crossing our witnesses. So that was something I actually brought up in the interview. That was a good thing. And before the interview, so memory refreshing, what I did, I kept notes, because you will forget some of the experiences that you've gone through in life, whether it's something in your workplace or uni or whatever. You sometimes forget, you even forget your awards that you get, and it's nice to keep a little notebook with you, like maybe a month leading up to the interview, and just write it down, like write the little things down in your notebook so you're reminded, and then you could just look back at it and see how you can present it. So that really helped me. And also looking back at my CV as well. I looked at my CV and it's all an idea of basically memory refreshing. So that really helped me, and I was able to like spiel off all this stuff that I did that I totally forgot, to be honest. And but then I just related it to me because it was a natural experience. So I mean, that really helped me as well. And I'd just probably say, in terms of look at current affairs as well, would probably be my last tip, because they will ask you a question. It's usually a for and against question. So you'd have to argue a point of, and it wouldn't always be a point of law. It could just be something in current affairs. Like I had, what do I feel about protesting, and what are the pros and cons of protesting and not protesting. And I had to look at it from both sides. So obviously in my head, like I might have a personal view thinking, okay, I think it's good to protest, and I think that everybody's should be able to put their point across to the world and put it on a world stage so that they are noticed and not held back. But however, I had to think counterintuitively as well and argue the other side, why it's not good to protest and why it would hinder people's experiences driving to work. And we were talking about the runway at Heathrow at the time. So I had to argue against that and what they were doing. So they really liked that I could argue both points, and you don't get much time for it. So you've just got to remember the interview is short, it's 20 minutes, and it's your best time to shine and be yourself, show your experience, why you want to do it, why you're inspired, and tell them about everything that you are. Because being a mother, it's great for time management for me. I'm able to like balance so much plates, and for that, they saw that as a plus. And now the bar is changing, it's becoming more diverse, in ethnicities, in genders, in sexuality, everything. And that's what they want at the bar. And I know definitely for Middle Temple, that's what they want. And, I must say, like, I'm really happy with that. I ended up at Middle Temple. I love inner as well. So for my other panelists, that are also inner, I don't have anything against inner, but middle was for me. And it's very much about finding the place that feels right for you as well. And, in terms of money, yeah, they do assess you on your financial income. So depending on what you get, you have as your income, they will then assess that. So make sure you're very honest with them and straightforward with them. Don't feel embarrassed. And whatever stage you're at life, Middle are there to help you. And they have a lot of other help available once you are a Templar and a member. So yeah, that's what I would say in terms of being a part-timer, being a mature student, being a mummy. And I'm really enjoying my course. I'm on my last 6 months now, doing the civil year. I've done the criminal year, and I wouldn't choose any other temple but Middle. So thank you.
Brilliant, Michelle, thank you. And just as a follow-up to that, because I quite often am asked, oh, if I join one in, can I then change to the other? So I just wanted to confirm, did you join Inner or did you never join Inner? And if
No,
you
I
did join,
never.
what did you go through?
Well, no, I didn't join Inner because you don't have to join before, you know, you have you could just go for your interview. And then after, if you do, you know, become a scholar, then you could, you know, you will have to join. But then if you don't, you know, you don't have to join, you could still look at other inns the following year. And that's what I did. But I think it's kind of similar. I mean, the other panelists for Inner will tell you their process of joining, but ours for middle was quite straightforward. It was a form you filled in, and then you had to provide your passport details and all these things. And it was quite straightforward. So I know I didn't have to join, and you can get away with that.
And that's what I was just going to say. From my experience, I would say to applicants not to join until you know whether or not you've got a scholarship, because I think that if you do join and then you try and swap to a different inn, it can be a bit difficult. So don't think that you're in a better position. I think Michelle's a clear example that you don't actually have to become a member first. So don't think that you're in a better position to get a scholarship just by becoming a member. You are not. Most people are not members when they interview. Brilliant. Thanks, Michelle. I'll just move on to, I think it's Musa, isn't it? Next, at middle.
Thank you so much, Paige, and congratulations on your scholarship, Michelle. I mean, I am Musa, Nela. I am originally from Albania. I'm studying the bar practice course full time here at the University of Law in Birmingham. So everyone that is in Birmingham, please feel free to contact me or meet up for coffee. I'm happy to. I'm a member of the Middle Temple. I joined the Middle Temple on my second year of my undergraduate, different from Michelle. And the reason I did that is that it's actually two reasons. One, because they interview every applicant, and that was very important for me. Other inns do not interview every applicant, and I was not great in papers. I had a struggle because English is not my first language. I had a struggle to write everything the way they want it, not the way I want it. And that is one of the reasons. And second is that if you are, the earlier you join an inn, the earlier you can start attending their events. And it is important to attend Middle Temple or whichever inn you are part of, so you can actually learn what is to be a barrister from barristers that have already retired, that have their experience, and they can give you the kind of support that that you are looking for. And doing these events, they can answer questions without you asking them. What I would say about the interview is that one, they are already open. So you have to make sure that if you are applying for one, you start making their applications from now on. Second, that what helped me the most is the fact that I had quite a lot of meeting with the employability team at the university. I'm doing my BPC at the same university I did the LLB, and that was quite beneficial for me because I wanted to make sure that whatever is my story, I have to put it there in the correct order. I have to answer the question the way they want to answer. I can waffle by 1,000 of pages, but they want to be concise. And if you leave appointments with your employability team or have a mentor or have someone that can look your work and review it, I think that is very beneficial. Very beneficial. I Another thing that if you are doing the interview is that make sure you have good references. You need two references to apply to support your application, and make sure that is someone that knows you. I mean, I had one tutor, one should be academic and one non-academic, but I made sure that I went to the tutor that knew me from year one. Not I wasn't focused on the fact that she is the head of operation or she is the dean of the campus or someone with a responsibility. I made sure that is someone that know me and know my story. And I was thankful to get two amazing references. So one from the CEO of Children's Society and one from an academic, that they, in a way, they have to prove what you are making in an application. If you don't have them talking about something different that is your life story, that's not gonna add a lot of weight. The interview is 15 minutes, so make sure that you find your own way of doing the interview. I did a different style from Michelle. I rehearsed the application process. I read my references quite a few times, but I didn't make any notes because for Michelle is good, but for me, if I have notes, I'll get distracted completely. And don't play it safe. Don't go there as scared. Don't go there that you are afraid of them. They are there to support you. I started the interview and I finished the interview, and then only in the last 2 minutes they have asked question. I was like freestyle there. I was like, this is me. This is my story. This is why I'm applying for your scholarship. You can answer the questions to the end. And even if they wanted to ask question, I was like, please save your question to the end. Show them that you are there. Don't be afraid and say, yes, what you gonna ask. And then be open about yourself. Like, be open. Michelle said right, they are looking for diversity. They are looking for someone that is unique, that they want to invest their time and their money. They want someone that will stay with them and make them proud. And I had a completely different story. I'm not a mother with kids. I'm so different from Michelle. I don't know how it is to be, but I came in UK at 17 and claimed asylum, and I didn't have family. I came from completely reason, and that's what I told them. I was afraid before to say that I'm an asylum seeker because I thought people, they will judge me, and they will say, no, we only want white class people, middle class. And that was in my mind because it make you feel that you are not good as enough as other applicants. And then I had like interview mocks with employability team that what I'm saying, I should be confident, not scared of saying it. And that's what I did. Like I spoke, I didn't spoke from notes. I didn't spoke from writing. You have to speak from your heart and make them really understand why you want to be barrister. And my answer was simple. I have been an asylum seeker. I have been rejected by the Home Department. I had to review. I was rejected by First Tribunal as well, and I felt unlawful. And that made me understand that one day I want to be in that position that in a way, I go to work every day knowing that there is someone needing my help, but most importantly, knowing that there is someone I can help, there is some way I can help them. And that's what they were looking for not for me to say that I'll be a great barrister because I have a great memory, I dress nice. No, they don't, because this is what everyone is gonna say. They want your life story, why you wanna be a barrister, not why everyone wants to be a barrister. And that was really difficult to come across because I had only 1 month to prepare the application process to get the references. You don't have the time of the world, and you have to balance everything with your studies and with your other applications for the bar course, application for the other scholarship or other funding, your personal life. And you have to make sure that when you are doing the application, you take 2 hours just for your application in the weekend. You don't just do it to go there. It needs that time, and take each question in turn. Don't read through all of them and try to combine. When they are asking why you want to be a barrister, they are only asking why you want to be a barrister. When they are asking why you didn't choose to become a solicitor, you have to answer why you didn't choose to become a solicitor. It's answering concise, but also answering the main point. Don't go out. People say it's great to go outside of the box, but not in the questions. And yeah, I mean, if there is any other question, I know I spoke a lot. This is how I feel better when I do it. Like I just speak and you have to listen and then you can answer the questions.
Don't worry,
So
all barristers know how to speak. I think that's tends to be what happens. But just something that you picked up on briefly, I'll just mention, and then I did have a follow-up question if that's okay. So Musa referred to other funding. So just so people are aware, you can also apply to providers, so i.e. ULaw, BPP, wherever you might want to go for the BPC, you can apply there for scholarships. And you can also combine your BPC with an LLM and obtain student finance funding. So that's just two things to think about as well. In terms of a follow-up question, Musa, I was just going to ask you, was there a question either on the application form or an interview that you found particularly tricky, and how did you deal with that?
Yes, I mean, I have the application form here, but one question that I felt I struggled was that they asked me, will you take instructions from the home office even though they have rejected you? And I had to think on the spot, because like I knew in a way they're gonna ask me something like this, but not strict. And I was like, as a barrister, I don't take cases personal. If I'm instructed by home office, I'm instructed by home office. If I'm instructed by a private client, I'm instructed by a private client. But also you have to make sure to answer without taking it personal. Like I said, I don't have anything personal with home office. They did their job when they rejected me, and then I will be in a position that unfortunately in the future I will reject someone else, and that's what it doesn't matter if I'll ever work with them or not, but that's how you have to answer. If you don't answer it on the spot, or if you think, take more than 10 seconds to think about the questions, that doesn't show in a way that you can stand on your feet. You cannot think on the spot. And that's like the beauty of being an advocate, because you have to spin it the way they want, not the way you think is the best way.
Absolutely, thank you, Musa. So there will be questions that I'll come to at the end, if that's okay, specifically. But if we can go to Lincoln's in next, that would be great. So we'll start with Poppy, if that's all right.
Yeah, sure. Hi everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I hope this is helpful. I'm a Lord Denning Scholar at Lincoln's Inn, and I'm also a residential scholar. So I currently live in Lincoln's Inn and will do for the next year whilst I do the bar course at ULaw in London, which is pretty incredible. The way that I'm going to talk is I'm just going to run through basically everything that I did up to my point of submitting the scholarship application, because I think that my unique selling point, as to put it, was my commitment and the things that I did to show that I was committed to the bar. And then I'll talk about like the interview and some other things. So I've always wanted to be a barrister. I've wanted to be a barrister since I was 8, which is incredibly unusual. Most people don't even know what a barrister is at that age. And so as I was going through school, I always knew that, okay, well, I want to go to university, I want to study law. What do I need to do in order to get onto a law course, etc. So I did debating at school extensively. And then I did law at the University of Liverpool. And I also did a year abroad in Hong Kong, or at least I attempted a year abroad. I'll speak about that a bit more. So in my first year of university, I volunteered at a law clinic, and I did refugee and asylum seeker claims, actually. And that is what sparked my interest in human rights and specialising in immigration law. And then I went on my year abroad to Hong Kong in 2019, which was during the protests there. So it's quite a unique experience, and the protests were sparked by a change to extradition law in Hong Kong, and it obviously affected human rights heavily, as I'm sure that you all saw in the news, etc. So I then decided, okay, immigration and extradition, they would go quite well together. So I want to specialise in those two subjects. I then had to come back from Hong Kong due to COVID. And whilst everything was online, I went to Calais in northern France for 6 months and did university whilst volunteering in a refugee camp in northern France. And then I came back for my final and 4th year at Liverpool and worked for refugee charities and did my dissertation on the areas that I was interested in. So I did it on Chinese extradition law. And then throughout my university, did things like mini pupilages. I think I did work experience at solicitors whilst I was at school. I was actually an Inner Temple Pass scholar, and then defected to Lincoln's. I never became a member of Inner Temple, but I had that experience. I did things like joining the Bridging the Bar scheme, the Society of Labour Lawyers. So I had quite a lot. And I know that is like quite an unusual amount, and you absolutely do not need all of that. but it meant that when I came to the paper form for Lincoln's, which is really important because Lincoln's don't interview everyone, they have a paper sift stage. When I got to writing, for example, the question, I think the first question is, what's your commitment to the bar? I had things that I could talk about. And it also meant that as I was going through different questions on my paper form, I wasn't just using the same experience. I wasn't just going, oh, well, I've done 3 mini pupilages, and so I really want to be a barrister. And then I wasn't going, oh, well, I did this on my mini pupillage, so I think this area is interesting. I could draw on different aspects of what I'd done and tie it all in so that each question was learning something new about me. And that's how I got myself and my story across, which the other two have always mentioned is incredibly important. So that's quite a lot. I don't recommend that you have to do all of those things, but definitely think about, for example, if you have an interest in a specific type of law, how could you get experience in that area? How could you learn more? Is there a module you can choose to learn more about it? Could you write your dissertation on that subject and learn a bit more? So that way, when the inevitable question, another inevitable question comes up, do you have any special particular areas you want to specialize in? Then you have a solid answer. What else can I talk about? Oh, I can talk about why I chose Lincoln's. As I mentioned, I was an Inner Temple Pass Scholar, which is a scheme, I think it stands for Pegasus Access Support Scheme, and it's for different groups of people can apply to it. So the criteria that I met for that scheme is that I'm from a low income, working class, single parent background. And so that's what qualified me for that scheme, and I could get on it. And they do things like go through your CV, you can do mini pupillage with them, you can go to a dinner in a temple. Anyway, that was a great scheme, but I thought that my strengths were going to be that I could get through a paper sift stage and get to an interview stage. So I went for Lincoln's because I thought, well, if 300 people apply to Lincoln's and 100 are cut out at the paper sift stage, then when I'm at interview, which I hopefully will be, I'll only be against 200 people, and they give out about 100 scholarships. So I thought, well, if I'm sat in the interview seat, I've got a 50-50 chance of getting a scholarship compared to inner and middle that interview everybody. And so when you're in your interview stage, you're against more people. That's absolutely not to put anybody off, because of course, as the other two have said, you might sell yourself better in person. But I kind of thought tactically and statistically about where I wanted to apply, and that's why I went with Lincoln's. And then I also went with Lincoln's because Lincoln's and Gray's do residential scholarships, so that's how I ended up living here. And inner and middle don't. And I am from Kent, and I wanted to do the bar in London, so I needed somewhere to live. So I thought, well, I might as well apply for a residential scholarship and see what happens. And just like Paige's advice at the start, like if you don't think you're going to get a scholarship, apply for one anyway, because you never know. The same goes for the residential aspect. What else can I talk about? So yeah, I think my unique selling point was that I had a lot to show that I was committed to the bar, which I think is incredibly important, because the inns are giving you a lot of money. They want to know that you're not going to do the bar course and then decide you don't want to be a barrister, and they've wasted so many thousands of pounds on you. So you've really got to sell yourself, and your commitment, I think, is something that is really important. And my first tip. My second tip would be confidence. Your paper sift application and your interview is your chance to sell yourself and be persuasive and convince them that they should give you a lot of money. And so if you don't have confidence in yourself and your ability to become a barrister, then why on earth would the panel have confidence in you? And I think that kind of will carry on throughout your career. If you're standing in court and you're trying to convince the jury that they should agree with you, then you need to have confidence in yourself and believe in what you're saying, otherwise no one else will. What else? Another thing just to point out for Lincoln's, at least, I think actually for all of the inns, is you are given a scholarship on merit, but then it's means tested. Yeah, you put in your own finances, be honest about it, because they will check. And also the bar is all about honesty and integrity, so you cannot lie on any stage or like exaggerate, because they'll find out and they'll test you on it. That included for me putting down bad grades that I'd got in my GCSE and A levels. Normally I would leave them off my CV, but I put them on my application form because, one, it's not the end of the world at all. You're at university, you're doing fine. But also, yeah, it's a big aspect of the bar is that you just really show yourself completely. And And then, yeah, another thing for Lincoln's, you can't defer unless it's for a medical reason, and that's different to inner. So I was exploring for a little while applying to inner because I wanted to do a master's. And with inner, I was told that if I applied for a scholarship, got a bar scholarship, and then decided I wanted to do a master's, then I could defer it. That's not the case with Lincoln's. You apply for the year that you want to start the bar course. So you'd be applying now if you wanted to start next September. And yeah, unless it's like a medical reason or bereavement, you can't defer. You have to accept it there and then, otherwise they give it away. And then one more thing to talk about before I talk about the interview is for your paper application. As we already know, like, you have to have 2 references. Make sure that you contact those people early. The way it works for Lincoln's is you have to put in the details of your referees. They get sent an email with a link, they click it, they do your reference and submit it. And then once you've got both of your references submitted by your referees, you can then submit your application. You cannot submit your application until your referees have done your references. And I had a very stressful time where it's like the day before the deadline and one of my referees still hadn't done their references for me. And so I couldn't submit my application. And there's kind of no excuse at that point. Like, it's your responsibility to chase them and make sure that's done. So I just want to highlight that so nobody has the traumatic experience that I did. And then, yeah, to talk a bit about the interview, it's 20 minutes. I think they all are. For Lincoln's, you are sent a list of questions in advance. So I use my mentors from the schemes Bridging the Bar and Society of Labour Lawyers. I'll make the point about deferring. I've just seen it in chat. I'll make that again later. So yeah, I use my mentors from the Bridging the Bar scheme and the Society of Labour Lawyers to go through the possible interview questions with me, and I drafted answers to them just in bullet point forms, because I absolutely did not want to be reading off the script. They'll be able to tell, even if it's online, if you're reading off the script in your interview. And kind of allocated what experiences I was going to talk about for each questions. And so that I wasn't repeating myself, but I was also getting across as much information as possible and really like bigging yourself up, because you've got to sell yourself in the interview. Turns out that I got asked hardly any of those questions in my interview, so it was completely, well, it wasn't pointless, obviously, because it's good practice and knowing what you want to talk about. But my first question in my interview was, oh, so your GCSE and A-level, no, your GCSE grades are good, your A-levels are bad, what happened there? That was my first question, which is obviously very intense. They did follow like some sort of scheme or like some sort of schedule. So for Lincoln's, they have like, I think, a list of 5 criteria that they're looking for when they're considering you for scholarship. And they kind of followed that criteria. So we talked about my academics, school, university, etc. Talked about legal work experience, talked about non-legal work experience, which can be just as helpful. Part-time jobs and hobbies can show so many skills. And then they would throw in random questions. So for me, I got like, have you ever handled money? Or tell me one time where you've shown lots of integrity, or what's the worst mistake you've ever made? And they will throw these things at you and put you on the spot. And so, of course, as Musa said earlier, you have to be able to think on your feet. And so that's where like practicing and thinking of questions that they might ask you and knowing what you're going to say can be really useful, because it doesn't have to be an exact question that you've prepared for, but if you've thought about questions they might ask you in an interview, you'll probably get some sort of version of it and have an answer prepared. And then for Lincoln's, you also have to prepare an area of law that you want to talk about. And you tell them at the start of the interview, okay, my area is X, Y, Z. So my area was asylum law in the UK. They go, okay, cool. Then they ask you all of the interview questions. And then at the end they go, okay, right, let's talk about your area of law. And for me, I was lucky because my panel knew absolutely nothing about asylum law in the UK. And they told me that. So I was like, okay, thank goodness, they probably won't catch me up, because it seems in this sort of circumstance, I know more than them. But that was lucky. You might have a barrister that is an asylum law barrister, and for example, for me, and so I couldn't make anything up because he will call you out on it. I thought I was going to be able to just talk for a few minutes on my area and be really passionate and persuasive, but they grilled me from the start. It was really hard hitting and they just wouldn't let you go, and they really pushed me on every single answer. So I finished the interview thinking, oh my goodness, I've completely flunked it. I'm not getting a scholarship. Obviously you did get a scholarship, and I think it's just because they are pushing you because they think you're capable. So if they start to make you sweat in an interview, that's a good thing. They think you're capable of giving them a good answer. So I wouldn't be too concerned about that. That's my final tip, is like stay cool, calm and collected. You can stop and pause and think about your answer. Of course, they don't expect you to be lightning fast. But part of being a barrister, I suppose, is being able to keep calm in those situations and talk very eloquently and have good answers and have good content in your answers as well. So that'd probably be my final thing to say. And then my point on deferral for Lincolns, just to repeat, is that Lincolns don't let you defer your scholarship. So if you get a scholarship, you have to use it for that year that you've applied for. You can't defer it to do a master's, for example. The only reasons why you might be able to defer is medical reasons or bereavement, I think, were the two examples that were given to me. So you have to use your scholarship, otherwise they'll give it to somebody else.
Brilliant, that's great. Thanks, Poppy. I think that's I think you went into everything, so I'll wait to ask questions at the end if that's okay. I think it's Emily next.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Emily. Like Poppy, I'm also a Lord Denning Scholar from Lincoln's Inn, and I'm now studying the bar course at the University of Law in Liverpool. I did my undergraduate at Liverpool John Moores University, so it wasn't a Russell Group university and also not a high-ranking university either. I think that's important to say because especially when I was going through the process, that was something I was really worried about, whether they wouldn't see me as intellectual enough for a scholarship because I wasn't at a top university, and it's definitely not the case. In terms of why I went with Lincoln's Inn, my reasons were very, very similar to Poppy in that I felt I would be good at a paper sift. And then your chances increase massively when you get to the interview stage. And how I decided between Gray's Inn and Lincoln's Inn was that I applied for the Newbeger Prize from Lincoln's Inn, which is open to anybody that's at a non-Russell Group university. So if that's somebody that's applying, then definitely look into that. In terms of how I approached the application then, the first thing I did was looked at the criteria on the website, because essentially this is all they are going to be marking you on. I wrote down each bullet point on the website on a separate piece of paper, and then I wrote down all of my experiences that I could make a link to that. And I think it doesn't really matter what experiences you have, but it's how you use them and how you articulate them on the form. So if it's a Saturday job in Asda, for example, you can still draw out things like integrity, advocacy, all those sorts of things out of that. It's just about how you articulate them. And I would say that for every question. Like Poppy said, with answering the questions, I would try and talk about different experiences and not constantly be repeating the same things, because I think once they've read it once, they don't really need to read it again, get all of your experiences in there. There's a question on the form about how you have acquired or begun to acquire the skills that you need to succeed at the bar, essentially. And in my view, this question asks two things. It's asking what skills you think that you need for the bar, as well as why you think you need them. And then the second point is, do you have them? And how have you been to get them? What's your commitment to the bar? For this question, what I did was I just Googled skills of a barrister. They will come up. I think the University of Law has a website and there's like 7 skills on that. Use 3 of them and link them in with your experiences. I think is a good tip. I think you can also link this in, for example, if you've done a mini pupillage and you want to say that you've seen a barrister do a certain thing, whether it's advocacy, research, something like that, you can just show that you're been watching on the mini pupillage. And then there's also a question about what area of law that you would like to go into. For this question, I do think it's quite useful to link it to whatever experiences you've got, whether it's legal work experience, non-legal, or whether it's just life experiences. So I was particularly interested in crime, and growing up on a council estate, definitely seeing the effects of the criminal justice system in my area. So I link that in. It doesn't just have to be experience that you've been out and done. Also, because I'd mentioned crime, I also mentioned that I knew that there were bad aspects of a career at the bar with crime. I'd read about legal aid, things like that. And then I stated why I still wanted to do it despite those things. I think that links in with you being perceptive, which is one of the things that they are looking for. I think somebody put a question in as well about there's questions on the application about what achievements you have at school and university. These are only short questions. I would say to just talk about one or two things in detail. So for example, if you were maybe a school counsellor and you campaign to change something, maybe talk about that and link that in with your advocacy skills. I don't think it needs to be anything extraordinary for that. In terms of the interview, again, I think the criteria is really important. What helped me was I went through the list I'd made when I was applying, my list of what experiences linked in with the criteria. I spoke to other scholars about what types of questions they were asked, what tips they had for me, mock interviews, anything like that. Something I did was just put a post out on LinkedIn to see if anybody would be offering to help, and you'd be surprised how many people will come forward and offer you support. So I'd certainly recommend that. So in terms of my interview then, I'm conscious to say the exact questions I was asked because it'll be different every year, and I think if you over rely on them, then you might be a bit stumped in the interview. I wasn't asked why I wanted to be a barrister. I was asked more about questions around what a career at the bar would be like. So things like, oh, how would you handle last minute briefs? I was asked the same question as Poppy about tell me a time you made a serious mistake. In fact, that was my first question and really threw me. And for that question, I did take a couple of seconds just to think about my answer. And I think that's absolutely fine. They want you to give a good answer. So taking a few seconds if you need it is fine. And then they will challenge you a lot on your answers and ask follow-up questions. So I'd be really careful not to over-exaggerate on anything that you say, because I think you will be catched out. So just to give an example of this, I was asked about my advocacy experience and asked how I prepare for that. And one of the points I said was that I anticipate what the other side are going to say. And the instant follow-up question was, give me an example of where you've done that and why did it work well. So if that was a lie, then that would have been interview over. So just think about over-exaggerating. They asked me a lot about my mini pupillages that I'd done. So I would recommend just having a good think back and trying to remember things from what you did on your mini pupillages. And it could be really discrete things that are useful as well. So I was asked if I'd ever seen collegiality at the bar, and I keep a little diary of my mini pupillages, and I remember reading in that diary that I'd seen two barristers having a laugh and a joke in between a trial. That was the example I gave them. So just make sure that you know your mini pupillages inside and out. Finally then, the advocacy exercise. So as Poppy said, it's about 4 minutes that you need to speak for. My advice for this would be to choose a topic that you're passionate about. Don't just try and pick a topic because it's niche or it's different. Pick something that you really do care about, because they're looking for advocacy. And I think if you're passionate about that topic, then you will show your advocacy skills. I think you need to know the topic well, because as Poppy said, this is where you will experience the most challenge from the panel, because they're testing how well you can hold your ground. I chose a topic that I'd written an essay on, so I was quite aware of the weaknesses in my arguments, the competing arguments, and I think that's a good thing to do. If there's an essay you've wrote that you enjoyed writing, or if it's your dissertation, you'll be quite aware of the area. So that's a good topic to use. But yeah, I think as well, if they do ask you a question on your topic that you're not entirely sure about, I know this certainly happened for me. Just for context, I spoke about the offence principle in criminal law, which is basically freedom of speech, and they'd asked me about a comedian and what I thought about his jokes. I didn't have a clue who the comedian was, and it's just a case of coming back to another point that you've made. So I just made the point of who I agree with what he says, but who would you trust to determine the limits on your freedom of speech? I think it's just about coming around the answer if you are faced with a difficult question. But above all, I think it's just important to be confident. I know going into these things, I don't come from a traditional background. I didn't know any lawyers, so going into that environment was terrifying for me. But you just have to remember that you're there on the same merit as everybody else, and there's no reason why you can't get a scholarship. And another point to make is that it's not a cross-examination. It very much felt like a conversation in my experience. I quite enjoyed my interview. The panel were really nice, and I could tell that they did want you to do well. And you've got to think they are giving up their evening or the weekend to interview you, so they don't want to just rip you apart. They do want to see you do well. But yeah, essentially I would just say be confident, and in terms of the paper application, make sure you've proofread it, grammatically correct, and then the interview, again, just be prepared, be confident.
Brilliant, thanks Emily. And that, just picking up on something that Emily said as well, is, you know, she mentioned not over exaggerating, and I've seen a fair amount of applications in my time, and people do it a lot. And what I would say is that, you know, for example, you might say, oh, I've done a mini pupillage and I've seen this and I've seen that, and there's no way you could have seen all of those things in 2 days at the bar. They're not expecting you to be a seasoned advocate or to know your way around court like the back of your hand. So please, please, please don't over-egg your experience, because they will see straight through you and it will not go down very well. That's what I would say in relation to that. There's been a lot of questions in the box about not having experience because of the pandemic. Now, I appreciate that it's been a really tough time to get experience. However, everybody is going to be saying the same thing as you. So you need to think outside of the box now. Put the pandemic behind you and think, well, what can I do now between now and March when my interview is going to be? People during the pandemic were running online competitions. There were sessions at chambers. There was stuff going on. There's been virtual mini pupillages. If you haven't had the opportunity to do those things, then you need to get on it right now and start doing things, please, because it's not going to wash just saying, I've had a terrible time during the pandemic and have not managed to gain any experience. There are lots of things reopening. Mini pupillages are back in full swing. Please apply for things and don't let that be the reason you don't get a scholarship, is all I'm saying. I'm going to go on to Inner Temple next. Just before I do, if you have any questions for Lucy, then please pop them in the box while she's talking, because she is going to have to leave fairly shortly and I don't want anybody to miss out on asking her any questions. So Lucy, you're up next.
Thank you. Just in case I freeze or drop off, my internet is very terrible. So as Paige said, I am in Inner Temple. Definitely not going to have as interesting of a background as the previous speakers. Mine will be quite short in comparison. Primarily why I chose Inner was because I did a marshalling experience with a judge who was also in Inner, and he kind of just sold it to me, and I think that was all I really needed, because all of them are very, very similar. So I think it's just the very, very minute discrepancies that you'll probably hear and pick up on from the speakers tonight that will really make your decision. Particularly for Inner, I think since they interview everyone, I knew that that was something that drew me to Inner, because I felt like I was better in person. A bit like one of the previous speakers, I'm very good at waffling. You get me talking about something that I enjoy and I will go for ages. But as well with the Inner interview itself, part of the largest part, especially for my interview, was doing talking about a case. So they give you a case about an hour before your interview. And this was something you probably won't have studied before. It will have been either in the news or just happened recently. It definitely won't be like R.V. Brown or Donahue and Stevenson, anything like that. But you will have been expected to have read it before your interview and be able to talk about like what the case was about and what if there was any dissenting opinions and just really things like that, to show that you're capable of not only reading a judgment but understanding it, and then as well giving your opinion on it. And I think for me, that was kind of half of my interview, because luckily for me, I'd actually read the case beforehand a couple of months prior. So I was able to actually have an opinion and really discuss it and say why I thought it was right, it was wrong, what should have happened, which law applied, things like that. With my application itself, I think they ask a lot of questions. Your application for INA is very, very in-depth. They ask why you want to go to the bar, what area you want to go into. They ask for each individual grade you've done. So the interview itself is not actually that much, because they've already read your application. It's primarily just to see how you are as a person. I don't think I got asked anything about my application at all. I got asked really obscure questions about what I knew about the bar and my timekeeping abilities and things like that. And I think that kind of drew from how I hadn't had that much law experience, unlike Poppy, who was quite intimidating with her credentials. I'd primarily just had jobs. I was a waitress, I was an event steward, I worked in IKEA. So I was able to draw skills from that and say, well, as a waitress, I've got a very good memory, and as in IKEA, I'm able to work in a team and things like that. So just showing transferable skills can be really, really important. So it doesn't necessarily have to be, I worked with like law clinics or anything like that. So I wouldn't worry too much in that respect, especially as there are a lot of fears about having that experience. I do think minis obviously are very important to show that you have considered the bar, that you know what it's about. But given how hard it is at the minute, even just attending open days, there are quite a few online ones going on. There's a lot of advocacy competitions as well opening up, just even applying to them. You don't necessarily have to win, but just seeing on your application, I've had the experience, I've got the feedback, I think this is important and can really demonstrate what I can do, just things like that. I'm trying to think what else I can add to that. My interview itself was I thought went horrendous. I actually finished the interview and cried because I thought, this is it. I've absolutely loved that, but obviously they thought differently. So I would definitely say, even if you think your interview went awful, you probably did a lot better than you think. And just like Poppy said earlier, I think if they're or Emily, I remember one of the speakers said, if they're testing you, if you feel stressed, it's probably a good thing. As well, I think I'm just going to reiterate what a lot of the other panelists have said. Be genuine, just being yourself. Don't lie. I had a friend once who tried to be really interesting and unique and said that they, as a hobby, did beekeeping. And in their interview, they were quizzed saying, what kind of bees do you keep? And they got caught out. So they didn't get very well in that interview. So just be genuine. You don't have to be like climb Everest by the time you're 10 or have joined the circus 4 times. You just have to be yourself. And as long as you can show that you've got the skills, as long as you show an interest in the bar, you've got a pretty good standing already. Also, like I said before, everything that you've done is an asset. So just like I hadn't had a lot of law experience, you can always bring in transferable skills, even if you've never had a job. Being a mentor, doing volunteer work, even mowing your neighbour's grass, you can always say something good about everything you've done. As well, I feel like I'm jumping between points, but just as I'm thinking of things in the interview itself, it's almost treat it like a moot, where you can ask for a minute, where you structure your answers. If you're confused about a question, ask for them to rephrase it rather than just trailblaze into something and absolutely mess it up, because it shows a lot more dedication and a bit of bravery, I think, by just saying, I just want a minute to have a think about that, and then you give a really astute and intelligent answer. Also, don't be afraid of telling them how amazing you are. You're trying to get money from them, so don't hide your achievements. Don't be modest. It's not a time for being like, who, me? Like, it's meant to be about you. Like, try really showcase your abilities, but also tread that fine line with don't lie and don't over exaggerate, but definitely don't be afraid to say why you're the best and why you should be given a scholarship. I think that's primarily what I wanted to say about my interview. I think everything else of why I chose INA, when I researched it a bit more after obviously being influenced by the judge, it has a lot of mooting and drama societies, which I thought was really good to get involved in. They have a lot of like mentoring and outreach programs and also marshalling programs. So it's like really good to get involved in. And I think my last point is that they base their scholarships on merit, but also means tested. So it is about academic excellence, but they do take into account your background as well. So it's not just primarily one or the other. I think that's all of my points that I can think of that haven't been already said.
Brilliant, Lucy, thank you. And 2 questions that I'm sure people will be interested to know. What was the name of the case that you had? They change every year, don't worry.
Yeah, I can't remember what the case is, but I remember if anybody can think of it, it came out in July last year. Oren Lawrence, Crown and Lawrence. It was about he'd lied about being infertile and then impregnating a woman, and whether that had negated her consent. So I remember that now.
Brilliant. And second question, did you have to argue a proposition, and what question did you get asked?
I didn't get argued at. I think it's because I spent so long talking about the case. Then they were just like, we just wanted to leave now. So I only got asked 4 questions overall.
Okay, never mind. Brilliant.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's absolutely fine. I think there may be a couple of questions in the box for you. Are you okay to answer them in the box? Is that all right?
Yes, no
just
problem.
because I'm conscious of time. And brilliant. Thanks, Lucy. I think Rhys, you may be next.
Hello. Can you all hear me on this mic? Sometimes this mic is a bit dodgy.
Yes, we can hear you.
Amazing. So hi, I'm Rhys. I'm a scholar at Inner Temple. So much that has been said already was on my list of things to say. So what I'll do is I'll go in a sort of chronological order, and I'll say a little bit about who I am. I'm 27 now, and I left school when I was 16 or 17, and I had no GCSEs or A levels. In fact, I didn't have any qualifications of any description until I was 24, when I got a 2-2 undergraduate in a completely random degree with the Open University. So I've got nothing that you would associate with being a barrister at all. And I say that to give anyone here who feels like they've got the wrong background hope that actually there's no such thing as the right or the wrong background anymore. Maybe a few years ago there was such thing, but there's not such thing. I've got no GCSEs or A-levels. I'm not an Oxbridge graduate, and I have a 2-2 in my undergraduate. Anyway, it brings me to the first point that I was going to make, which is selecting the inns. And it's clear to me that everyone who has spoken made the right choice, but it is a choice that needs to be made, and it needs to be made right. What was going through my mind when I was choosing my inn was a barrister and judge who I knew, who was acting as mentor for me, said one thing. He said, follow the money. It sounds really cold, but it makes such pragmatic sense, because each inn is very, very slightly different and means very slightly different things to each individual. So, and you've heard it in very different ways with each of the different speakers. So for me, and for the speakers who are in Middle Temple and Inner Temple, it was valuable that Inner Temple and Middle Temple guarantee an interview. That means that for me, that's where the money was. That's where the money was. I had far more chance of getting the money from Inner or Middle. And you'd be amazed how many people who I've spoken to who have asked about advice on choosing inns. who are very sentimental about their selection of inns. You know, the reason for choosing inns varies from they know someone who's at an inn, so they want to go to the same inn, to they have a famous judge who was at an inn, so they want to go to that inn, or they even like the architecture of an inn and therefore they want to go to that inn. Ignore all that. The inns don't care which inn you choose, and you shouldn't care anything about that. Follow the money. Go where you feel you're going to benefit the most. If you are confident, like Poppy was, that she was going to get an interview, regardless of whether of the strength of your application, if you're putting in an interview, then perhaps you should look towards the different characteristics of Lincolns and Greys, because then there may be added perks within the inns, like the residential scholarship, for example, or Greys themselves. We'll hear about Greys a bit more, but there are other valuable things that will have long-term implications in your future career. It's all about the money, and I sound so callous when I say that, but that's what it's all about at this stage. Anyway, you've chosen your inn, you're sitting down, and you've got your application in front of you. Like me, when I was first applying, you've got no mini privileges on your belt because of this pandemic thing. You've also, I mean, you've got a career in music, maybe, like I do, or you've got barely any experience in law. You feel as if this is a crazy idea because you suddenly ask, how are you going to demonstrate that you have a commitment to the bar? This is where you have to remind yourself that the written advocacy stage and the oral, the written application stage and the oral interview stage are fundamentally considered by the inns as written and oral advocacy. It's an opportunity for you to demonstrate your skill as an advocate. And that is how you approach it. So you may just have to accept that you are at a slight disadvantage compared to other applicants, and that your task in convincing the inn that they should give you a scholarship is going to be slightly harder because you have a slightly less dense background than other candidates have in regards to experience with the law. You have fewer mini pupilages, for example, or something like that. But instead of despairing at that, you see that as an opportunity to demonstrate your skills firstly as a written advocate, and show that the experience you have outside of law. So, for example, I would draw on my experience as a public speaker and as a singer. I would explain how, when I was a singer, I was trained in my ability to communicate with an audience of strangers, etc., etc. And drawing on anything that you feel demonstrates that you have the ability to be an advocate and a barrister. If you can draw on that and present that as an argument, you will have a trump card in your inferior position that you may perceive as being inferior anyway, because you have an extra ability to show that actually I'm a better advocate with my application. So don't despair if you feel as if it's if your CV is a bit shaky at the stage of application, but also be opportunistic. And I have seen in the chat that people are concerned that there's lack of things that are going on there, lack of experience that's out there to available. But okay, maybe there are fewer mini pupilages out there, but there are other things that you can get if you're opportunistic. So, for example, I applied for various roles within my university. I was elected as the Disabled Students Union Officer, and I was also elected as the student representative for the LLM course. And these were roles which I was able to put onto my application, onto my CV, because, for example, I needed to run an election campaign, and that meant I had to sell myself to my peers, and I needed to demonstrate qualities that you would expect to see in a barrister by running some sort of campaign in this sort of way, and I was able to pull it off. So be opportunistic and be abstract with the way you think about how you can put things onto your application. And don't see the written application as the end of the process, because when you reach the interview stage, they'll ask if there's anything that's happened since you've written that you want to talk to them about. They asked me about that, and I had plenty to say. I reveled in the chance to update them. So you've got past the written stage, and with Inner, if you've chosen Inner, you've already guaranteed yourself an interview anyway. You know that you've received this test an hour, this case an hour earlier. There's nothing you can really do to prepare for that. You're just given it, and you have to have learned how to identify the ratio, the facts, and form an opinion on them. And there's not much advice I can give you about that, really, because it's just what you have to do. They'll grill you a little bit on it. I think they grilled me a little bit less on that than, was it Lucy that was speaking before me? Because it felt a bit like a moot. I agree, it felt a bit like a moot. I was asked to give sort of an opinion in the same sort of way that I would have to give it in a moot, but I had such a short time to prepare for it. An hour was really not a long time to prepare for it, and they did challenge my opinion, but they were much more keen to put me through my paces on the 1 minute topical question, and for that, advice is to just watch the news, read the newspapers a lot more, just generally get the vibes as to what's going on in society at this general period of time, because even if, firstly, it's probably going to come up. Your question is going to be about something that you've read about. Secondly, even if it isn't, you'll have something to contribute from that's topical at the time. Mine was about COVID. It was about COVID passports, and I had to give, for a minute, I was given 1 minute to prepare my answer and 1 minute to give an answer as to why COVID passports were a good thing. And then halfway through giving my 4, they interrupted me and said, "Can you now give an against?" And I was like, "Whoa," that threw me off, because I'd been told I would only be having to give one side of the argument. So I'd planned the whole structure of my argument for 1 minute. Was, oh yeah, that threw me a little bit. Next, know your application, because they do feel as if they're testing to see that you didn't just sort of say what you said in your application to get the scholarship. You know, they want to check that your written application holds out to a bit of scrutiny. So you don't want to go into your interview having not seen your application since you submitted it. Make sure that you've read it a few times since you submitted it, because then when they ask you about a matter which might need clarification, you won't say anything that contradicts yourself, that you might, or even potentially contradicts yourself, because I'm sure you haven't, or you wouldn't have said anything that's not completely correct. You've not lied or anything. However, with the passage of time, things like that ambiguities can show themselves, and it's really good to just make sure that there's no risk of that happening, because you can make yourself look a little bit of a fool. But as long as you've read your application again and again, then you can be sure of it. Also, just briefly while I'm still on the written application bit again, just remember that this is, and I don't really need to say this, but this is going to be one of the most valuable things that ever happens to you. And not just the one-off payment that you get for the bar course, but if you look at a majority of pupils at Chambers and the majority of the younger junior barristers, most of them say scholar of one of the inns, and it comes with a level of prestige because the Chambers know that there was a panel of 4 barristers / judges who interviewed you and decided to give you £11,000 because they believe that you are going to be a good barrister. So you've got you've got a vote of confidence as well as a financial investment, and that vote of confidence will stay on your CV forever. So make sure when you submit just before you submit your application, get it proofread. Get it proofread. Get it proofread. I beg you, get it proofread, because if you get rid of all the grammatical errors, you're gonna then again bump it up again, especially if the sifting, if you're at Lincoln's or Gray's where they're sifting it, get rid of the grammatical errors, and you're going to bump it up even further, and you're going to really boost your chances. And that vote of confidence, that vote of confidence will stay with you forever. And lastly, my last point, which I always leave people with, is that when you're in there, just be calm and be within yourself. And to achieve that end goal, remember that the panel volunteer themselves as a scholarship panel because they want to be involved in the investment of the next generation of leading advocates in the bar. That means that they are really keen for you to succeed in your interview. When they are there watching you, whether you're behind a screen or whether you're in person, they want you to succeed. They're not trying to trip you up. They're not trying to see you flustered or sweating or anything like that. They want you to succeed. And if you can go in there knowing that you're just in a room of people and everyone in that room wants you to come out there successful, I just took great confidence from that and great solace. So good luck, everyone. And I'm very happy to answer any questions.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rhys. I'm just going to move on, and so we've got time for the questions at the end. But Laurie-Elizabeth, do you want to go next?
Yeah, that's fine. So hi, everyone. First and foremost, I got a scholarship from Gray's Inn. I'll talk more about that in a moment. But a little bit about me. So I'm a mature student, like some of the others. I am 30 next month, and I'm a single parent to an 8-year-old boy, and the first person in my family, thank you, and the first person in my family, in my entire family, to go to university. I'm from a working class background and I've got a very normal accent. I don't sound like a barrister should. Many people think that we have to change our voices or similar to fit in with the status quo, essentially, but that's absolutely not true. And I just want to reassure anyone out there with a regional accent or anything like that, that you can too be at the bar. I studied at the Open University full-time alongside working. It was the only option for me, really. Not that it meant any less, but it just meant that obviously I could provide a roof over my son's head, as well as getting an income at the same time. When I started my degree, I actually worked in like a backstreet garage doing the accounts for them. It was the only job that would allow me to work for 2 hours a day while my son was at nursery. However, I did sort of get the idea very quickly that legal experience was preferential, and it was something that I probably needed to gain because at this point I had no legal contacts. And I was sort of jumping in at the deep end. I didn't even tell anyone that I was doing a law degree because I actually had no belief in myself either at that time, which is something, again, I'll address at a later stage tonight. So I started working at a solicitor firm, Warden Ryder in Coventry, as a legal secretary and cost administrator, which I really enjoyed. And then again, it was sort of helped with ticking that box on the application form. I study at ULaw in Birmingham. I'm doing the bar course and I've just started, so I'm drowning in it as much as everybody else at the moment. You feel like you're I think there was a meme on Instagram that says that you are 3 weeks in but you're 2 years behind, and that is exactly how I feel right now. And I was originally going to do the bar course part-time, for financial reasons really, so I could work. And however, obviously getting the scholarship, it's meant that I can actually do the bar course full-time now. Some people ask why I chose to study at the University of Law. I've got to be honest with you, for me, it was purely logistics. So it was a toss-up between BPP and ULaw in my mind. And BPP only offer the part-time course in London. So it's hiked up prices as well, because obviously it's London prices. And also for me, I just couldn't afford to get to London every few weekends, as well as spend that time away from my son. So the scholarship I received, like I've mentioned, it was from Gray's Inn, and I received the Baroness Hale of Richmond scholarship, which I've got to be honest, when I applied for the scholarship, thank you. When I applied for the scholarship, I didn't even know the scholarship existed, because never in a million years did I think I was going to get a scholarship. It wasn't from lack of care that I didn't know it existed. I just didn't, like I said, I didn't even think that I was going to get a scholarship. For me, scholarships were what you saw in films, or for people that were highly, academic. And I don't know, I sort of had a little idea that it was for wealthy people. That is probably a really poor misconception, but that was my, interpretation of scholarships at the time. So it wasn't until I received an email stating the name award and how much I would receive. It's a minimum award of £20,000 for the Baroness Hale. And it was then that I realised the enormity of what had happened. And it was honestly the most surreal day of my life. And I think it's really important. I'm not telling you how much I received to brag. I'm telling you because it's so important to realise that scholarships do happen to normal people. You can get a scholarship. It's not, I don't eat something fancy for breakfast that gives me some minerals or something else that nobody else has got. I'm just a normal person from a very regular background that has just put in the necessary steps, let's say, and put in some bloody hard work, and then you can get there. It's just about hard work and consistency. And I just want everybody to know that they have the same opportunity as every other person. You just got to believe in yourself. I know that some of the other panelists have said that earlier, and really, you've got to back yourself. So I am a big advocate of freely discussing imposter syndrome. I mentioned earlier that people didn't even know that I was doing a law degree, and that was purely through fear of failure. And this scholarship has really changed my life. And like I think it was Rhys mentioned earlier, I'm not sure, but it is a vote of confidence that somebody's given you. Your inn believes in you, and you won't realise, that for mental health purposes is just one of the biggest and greatest, vote of confidence that you can have, really. So like Paige said earlier, even if you think that, even if you have money, or even if you just don't think that you can get a scholarship, apply. You genuinely have nothing to lose. So I've been asked a few questions offline as well, and I'd like to the opportunity to answer those, and then obviously I'll stay on at the end to answer any other questions. So something that we get often asked really is, why did we choose the inn that we chose? For me, it wasn't about tactics. So I did a lot of research into the inns. I'm a bit of a research buff, or whatever you want to say. I went on, looked online about the different statistics, facts and figures of the other inns, of their scholarship process, and of the inn in general. I did take into consideration other factors such as which looked the prettiest. I don't recommend you do that, but I did. And I also went to 2 open events. So I went to a Lincoln's open event, which was really lovely, and I took full advantage of the canapes, very nice. And I went to Gray's. So I applied for an advocacy day back in 2019. I was successful in my application. And then when I went there, I was really inspired by Mary Pryor QC and Ivan Hare QC. I listened to them both speak, and Ivan also judged a impromptu cross-examination of mine, and it was just really nice, intimate and approachable in. That's what I found right from the start. And I'm a big kind of sentiment person. And when I was walking around the grounds, I just got a really strong gut feeling that this was the inn for me, you know, and it wasn't any more than that. Honestly, if I hadn't got a scholarship from Gray's, I would have still joined Gray's Inn. That was how I felt about it. So I've just jotted down some notes. So if you do see me looking off screen, that's why. So I get that people choose tactically who interviews the most, or who doesn't paper sift, let's say. And you've got to do whatever's right for you. The other panelists have said that, you know, if you potentially don't come across as strong on paper, then obviously it makes sense to go for an inn that, you know, interviews everybody. However, for me, others have said as well, I'm a mature student and my paper application was actually, in my eyes, going to be quite strong. In, you know, I don't mean that in a big-headed way, but I've just got some kind of a variety of experiences from, you know, some of them weren't legal either. I know Lucy mentioned that she'd been a waitress. I'd been a door host at TGI Fridays. I'd worked for Virgin Trains. I'd done a variety of things that I just thought that I could, you know, put into my application form in the best possible way. And then also, like Rhys said, it is about the money as well. And I knew that Gray's Inn had the highest initial awards. I think they're £5,000, the minimum awards are at Gray's. And I've got to be honest, I needed the money. I was only originally going part-time before because I just couldn't physically afford full-time. So for me, it was, you know, where the money was at as well. So I've been asked, what is your general advice for the application form? For me, evidence is everything. So it's something that sounds a bit stupid, but it's so easy to forget that the experiences are only in your memory bank because you did them. So many times I would just almost presume that the panelists knew my experiences. It's silly. I know that you by now might have already done a number of application forms and it's probably becoming a bit repetitive and, you know, and it does get a bit samey. However, you've got to treat each one fresh and as if, you know, they've never heard your experiences before. And that might sound so obvious, but so many times I just forgot experiences off because, you know, I just presumed they already knew them or something. Also, every question that requires it. So, for example, give us a time when you showed creativity or lateral thinking or something similar like that on your application forms. So then stipulate those skills. This is the method that I used. It was a bit like the STAR method mentioned earlier. But stipulate those skills or the quality that's required and tell them how you acquired that skill and then state how that will help you become an excellent barrister. So that's what I did with every single question. It was like a 3-part question every single time. And you don't get a lot of margin for chit chat. So sort of stipulate the skill, what you did, you know, how you did it essentially, and then why or what skill you will take away from that to move forward and become an excellent barrister. That's how I approached mine anyway. It also asked me about things like achievements whilst at school and simple things such as being in part of a netball team or being, you know, part of a buddy system or something, you know, similar. It doesn't have to always be these all singing, all dancing, you know, experiences. There can just be simple things like that that show that you are a team player or that you have interpersonal skills. Because I think that's another thing. Don't ever forget how valuable interpersonal skills are. Because sometimes we can be so fixated on grades and academia that, you know, it almost becomes a bit robotic. You know, you've got to be liked as well, essentially. In your application form, I've put a heading bad grades. I got bad grades. So my mum moved us around a lot in my childhood. So I actually didn't learn the syllabus that I took exams for. So I moved during my GCSE year and I moved back during my A-level year. My grades were appalling. And so I had to address that in my application form because I knew that that was a weakness. So be honest, you know, Some people say don't put adversity in the box. Some people ask about the adversity question. Somebody's mentioned it in the chat box. For me, you utilize it. If something's happened, be honest about it. You can't change your life. You are here, you are where you are now, and you're still here through hard work, determination, or whatever else it may be. Your grades don't define you. Yes, they may get you more points in your pupillage application at a later date, or yes, they may get you through that initial paper sift, but you're more than your grades, and remember that. It's really important to remember that. So again, I've just mentioned, somebody asked about adversity. So I have overcome a lot of adversity in my life, and it doesn't mean that you have to have overcome a lot of adversity in your life to succeed, but just be honest about it. It may go in your favor, it may not. I took a risk. I didn't know whether it would go down well or whether it wouldn't, but just bite the bullet and be you. And yeah, so my application, I've just put that it was treated like an open book. And I think that came across in the interview. The panelists really, it just felt like a chat. Somebody mentioned it earlier. It did feel like a chat. And I think it just makes you build up that rapport with people. And also it makes you a little bit relatable as well. Everyone's gone through things in their life, no matter what it is, you've still overcome something in your life. Just be honest about it and be open. So my experiences, I did have a few niche experiences. So I had advocated both orally and in writing in a county court trial for a vulnerable person. So I do think that helped in my application form. And I also volunteer for a charity called Cardiac Risk in the Young. And these experiences were picked up in the interview. So try and think outside the box if you can. And I mean, obviously it's not going to be an experience that everyone's going to have the ability to be able to do, but whilst we appreciate, and everyone probably does appreciate by this point, that there are tick box experiences that sort of ought to be done, such as mooting, mini pupillages, things like that, these other experiences can be brought in and make you a bit more interesting, I think, as well. Let me just have a little look. I think I've addressed half it. I'm sorry, I'm going at a million miles an hour. I'm just wary of time. Okay. So when it comes to the interview, we got a topical question 20 minutes before, and 20 minutes, oh Lord, goes very quick. Very quick. So after you've got over the initial hyperventilation, because it happens, just remember to breathe, because it is, the time does go quick, and always prepare both sides. As you heard from Rhys earlier, yes, they do tend to focus on one side, but they pretty much always get you to flip it. So just, even if you write 2 bullet points, just let them know that you have thought about that. So the question I got asked was, should jury trials have continued in lockdown? That was the one that I got asked. Obviously it's very topical at the moment, and I think it was quite a nice question, to be honest with you. Other questions that I got asked, and I'm only repeating these because I'm going to go on to something later about a question bank, which I think is really important. So you can pop these in your question bank if you choose to do that. So what areas of law are you interested in and why? What skills do you think you can bring to the bar? What do you need to work on? Which is a really, it's a difficult question, really. Why not a solicitor? And then they criticised my application form a little bit. They said that a lot of your experiences, it was in 2019 and 2020. What could I have done better or more of? And what will you do if we don't offer you scholarship? I'm quite aware that that comes up quite a lot. So I think you need to prepare for that. For me, I knew that I wanted to go to the bar. So I had planned to do the LLM alongside the bar, for student loan, of course. And then I had saved up the difference between the 11,200 or whatever it is now that you are awarded, and the price of the bar course and the cost of the bar course. So I was prepared for that question, sorry. And then how will I have the energy to continue within criminal law if that's where I chose to go? So that was the final question. Another point I'd like to mention is references. It's already been discussed earlier as well. Get them in early on. With Grays, your references are as part of a portal, so they get their own login. So you can actually do that and as soon as you enter in your referees' email addresses, it goes to them. So I would do this sooner rather than later, almost instantly. So they have the full amount of time to be able to get them in, because I think, like Poppy mentioned earlier, you don't want them to mess up your application essentially. And also it gives them time to think and really reflect, and potentially you can sprinkle a little bit of information that you want them to add or something like that. I don't know how close you are to your referees. I chose a tutor from my university who I did pro bono work with, and I chose a director of the law firm that I worked at as well. So I found it gave sort of the most holistic approach to my referees, but one academic, one work. And then I felt that I was going to put my personal experience into my application form. So what I wanted to do was create a sort of 360 picture of me and who I am and what I can bring to the bar. And I know it sounds cheesy, and this probably isn't necessarily application advice, but if you do get as far as the interview, first of all, well done. And then secondly, I listen to podcasts and motivational speeches. And I know that sounds a bit crazy, but for me, like I've mentioned before, open advocate of discussing imposter syndrome, that is something I wholeheartedly suffered and suffer with. And it really gears you up. I mean, if you ask Alexa as well, she plays one. If you just say, play a motivational speech, I can highly recommend it. Just gets you going before the interview and helps you, you know, have that little bit of confidence in yourself. One final point before I conclude really is that have a question bank. So I recommend asking previous scholars or barristers for mock interviews, or you know, figure out what questions they were asked in their interview and create a chart, a mind map, or some kind of document that sets out all the questions that have been asked previously and just some bullet point answers that you might use to answer them. This gives you a helping hand for not only scholarship, but for pupillage interviews at a later date. And it just gives you an idea of, you know, what comes up, how often it comes up. And also, there's only so many questions that they can ask, essentially. You know, they're all pretty much along the same lines. So it just gears you up for that, really. So my final points are, remember, this sounds really obvious, but the panel are human. They are you or I with just more experience. They know you're nervous. So, you know, it's okay to be nervous. And also, if you are guilty of speaking a million miles an hour, like I am, you know, try and slow down, but at the same time, just be you. You know, I know that there is a really great amount of pressure on people, especially if you struggle financially as well, because you really feel like this is your only option to get to the bar. But it isn't. There are other ways around it. For example, the LLM and other things that I've discussed, or doing it part-time, which obviously allows you to apply for scholarship over 2 years. You know, there are other avenues as well. So just try and remember that. Have faith in yourself. And finally, don't Gray's Inn are guilty of sending you a panelist bios. So they tell you who your panel are, and then they tell you how successful they are. And this actually instills fear into you. I had a lady that had given advice on Brexit, all of these horrific, talented people that were on the panel. Just don't look into it. Don't read into it. You know, it will just panic you. You know, just look at them as 4 ordinary people. I had 4 panelists. Oh, and last one, sorry, last one. A lot of people also say that the pandemic has caused a lack of opportunity. I am a little bit, I really don't think it has. Okay, and hear me out before you go mad. So yes, okay, there are a lack of opportunities in person. However, we need to appreciate the vast amount of opportunity that's actually been created by the pandemic as well. For example, the accessibility to events, everything's moved online. Your interviews may be online. And the one thing that I can be honest about is that they're going to question why, if there isn't any opportunity, you haven't created it. They are going to think if you are you know, you're going on to a self-employed career where you have to drum up, you know, solicitors who are going to instruct you. You need to have your own unique selling points. They are going to question why you are applying and saying that there's been no opportunities. So, you know, that's sort of the end of the road. Like Paige has done today, you know, create opportunities, create events, host an event. I've done some plea and mitigations. I've done some, you know, interim injunctions. These are all available to you on an online platform. So just utilize it. Think outside the box. It doesn't have to necessarily be legal. It can be a debate. It can be anything. But whilst you have the opportunity to utilize things like Zoom and things like that, which are easily accessible by a variety of people, use them and it will look absolutely smashing on your application form. Sorry to have gone on, but I hope that helps a little bit. Like I've said to you in the chat box, feel free to reach out to me if you want any more information.
Thanks, Laurie. I know that some people have asked how to structure answers. I mean, just briefly what I would say, and tell me what your view is, Laurie, but essentially what I did was, when I was at Inner Temple, they said argue for or against animal rights legislation, for example, and I said I will argue for this proposition for 3 reasons. My first reason is X, my second reason is X, my third reason is X, and that's how you show structure. So people have asked, do you approach it like a moot? Go to court, sit in the back of a courtroom and watch how advocates formulate things or put things. They will do a very similar thing. They will say, Your Honour, I've got 2 points, or I say this for 2 reasons. That's the sort of thing you need to do without saying, these are my 2 submissions. My first submission is. That's not going to get you anywhere in an interview. But at least saying I've got 2 points, or I've got 2 arguments for that proposition. My first one is X, my second one is X. And that way you're going to keep it clear, you're going to keep it structured, and you're going to show that you've got the potential to be a good advocate.
Yeah, 100% Paige, I totally agree. I just think that, you know, just do signed posts, because barristers love that, you know, just as you would, you know, in a moot or something similar. And yeah, and just, yeah, that's it really, just signpost. And I think I agree with you wholeheartedly, Paige.
Brilliant. Thanks, Laurie. And last but not least, Tanya.
Hi, I'm Tanya. I am a Gray's Inn Scholarship winner. I won the Wilfred Watson Award. Please don't ask me who that is or what they did. It's one of the lower awards with Gray's, but I'm very lucky to have been able to get enough with that and the means test to cover my course fees. I haven't done any enormous preparation for this talk, and this kind of brings me to the whole being yourself thing. In my interview, I was quite honest and said most of the time, you know, I have no idea what day it is, where I am, or what's going on. And I use that to my advantage. It means I can jump into things at the last minute. I'm really good in a crisis, or if something changes, and I can think on my feet. And of course, those are some of the fairly essential advocacy skills. So as I've been listening to Laurie-Elizabeth talk today, I've been literally scribbling down a few notes here. And I want to start by saying that I met Laurie-Elizabeth on a masterclass, an advocacy class that we did together, and I thought she was the barrister. So, you know, Laurie-Elizabeth, you are absolutely made for this. There was no doubt in my mind that you would get a scholarship. And I remember when we went through the application process together. Most people have covered everything. I have to say, I perhaps do things a bit differently from a lot of people. I did choose my inn based on sentimentality, I suppose. I had been to Lincoln's Inn in person. It was lovely, but there was that feeling of being home that was missing. And I know that when you join an inn, you're stuck with that inn pretty much forever. And I wanted to join somewhere that felt right. And every time I found a legal hero, I mean, Lady Hale, for example, I mean, she is the most incredible person. Helena Kennedy, who I've heard speak, terrifying, but incredible QC. every time I found someone I really admired and looked them up, they were from Grays. And we're in the middle of a pandemic, so I couldn't visit any other places in person, but every time I looked at all the inns, it just kept bringing me back to Grays. And so I joined before I applied for scholarship. And the reason I did that is because I knew there wasn't a hope in hell of me actually getting a scholarship. So I just wanted to join Grays to be a part of it. It never, literally, I know it's cliche, it never occurred to me in a million years that I would be here a year later having this conversation with you. I got some stats from Grays to share with you, if that helps. Last year, they received 302 applications. They interviewed 176 people, and they have awarded 84 scholarships. I was awarded one of their lowest scholarships, the Wilfred Watson, which was £5,000, which was wonderful. It makes a small dent in the bar course fees. And then they asked me to fill in a form for the means testing part of it. It is the form from hell. It is horrible. And what I was not expecting was that that 5,000 would be bumped up to not only cover all of my fees, but also pay, I've just paid for an additional mediation qualification and for a laptop as well. So I am extremely grateful. They've told me this time if an applicant is successfully shortlisted, they will receive an email in January, and the interviews are scheduled for the 7th, 8th, and 9th of March. They will ask you one question based on a topical subject of some kind. As Laurie-Elizabeth said, last year we had an option, I think, between two. One was jury duty, and I can't remember what the other was. They are not looking for legal expertise. They're looking to see if you can present your argument in a way that makes sense. Can you speak? Really is what we're looking at. So please don't worry about the legal side. I think for me, because I really wasn't expecting a scholarship at all, because I'm not particularly academic, I work really hard to scrape a 2-1. And so that it didn't occur to me that I would get through. I just knew that there were a lot of applications in law. And so I thought if I start getting practice filling in forms, then, you know, that will help. I have no GCSEs, I have no A-levels, I am in my 40s, so I'm definitely not your traditional route student. The best thing I have ever done that I think contributed to my scholarship and to a lot of the other legal experience I've had is actually getting involved in everything I can. So when people ask me for advice, and it happens a lot, my general advice is to do the things, do all the things, do the things you're interested in, do the things you're not interested in, take the extra courses, go to the many pupilages online, in person, it doesn't matter. So many people say to me, like Laurie-Elizabeth said, that they don't want to do it because it's virtual. Half the legal world is virtual right now. It doesn't matter if it's online or if it's in person. Courts are happening virtually, interviews are happening virtually. Because of the pandemic, I am now a member of international organizations and go to meetings on human rights of lawyers in Turkey and in Singapore, and I go to meetings all over the world because it's virtual. Take advantage of it. It doesn't have to be a bad thing. LinkedIn has definitely been one of my biggest bonuses. I had no idea so much could happen from a social media site. Through LinkedIn, I met Laurie-Elizabeth. We were both invited to an advocacy masterclass by Mary Pryor QC. Literally an invitation landed in my messages, which is pretty amazing. I have also since been invited to do some marshalling. I have been invited to shadow a barrister in the Court of Appeal. I have been asked by so many other people to do so many things because of social media. And I have just started my barrister's training course with BPP, and they really are drilling into us that LinkedIn is essential. You really need to have that presence. If you don't have it set up, go and find a few people on LinkedIn who you like the look of and you like how they do their work, and start filling out your own bio and getting it going. It really is important. Most of my questions on my application form for Grays were not based on academia or even work experience. I had been a childminder and lone parent for years. I have volunteered for many different charities. I never realized they would be useful in this. And for example, my lateral thinking question, they ask about a time you used lateral thinking to solve a difficult situation. Mine was about baking bread using vegetable pulp. These answers don't have to be based on your grades or your schooling unless you want them to be. For me, every question on the form, I made 2 bullet points and I came up with 2 ideas that would pop into my head. Doesn't have to be logical. I'm a big believer on going with gut instinct. And I would put them down. And then when I came back to it, I would pick the one that I could fill out the answer for best. Most of my answers, as I say, were based on personal stuff and not particularly on the academics. Transferable skills is a really big topic for me. Having had the interview with Grays and pupillage interviews as well, when I talk to people now who ask for advice, I say, if you can get up in the morning and get dressed, you have transferable skills. If you can eat a meal, you can transfer those skills. You are organized enough to do it. You have the coordination to put your clothes on. I know I'm being a little facetious here, but it's really important to think of the everyday things you do. There are skills in there that you can transfer to be used at the bar. So looking up, the skills of a barrister, for example, being able to speak. I mean, I can talk all night. I'm one of those. So my problem is the opposite, is reining it in, as you can probably tell. Being able to hold an argument. I've been accused of being stubborn since I was born. Now it's coming in useful, finally. And that includes tenacity and determination. The skills that you use every day when you're studying, when you're doing group work at uni, whatever you're doing, take the skills that you've learned there and transfer them across to your application form. I promise you, you will have them. So my really cheesy thing is before I have an interview or anything, I don't know if you've seen the program Silk. It is available on Amazon Prime. I can't recommend it enough. It's one of the few things that is about barristers in the UK. I absolutely love it. I have to have seen it at least 8 times. And the theme song from Silk is what's drumming through my head on extra loud volume right before I have an interview or anything like that. That is my equivalent of the motivational speech or the podcast. I can hear it now. It's just there. So find yourself a theme song, a motivational speech, anything like that, and believe in yourself, because it's your personality that will get you through to your interview and to your scholarship. So be who you are, and who I am is chaotic. I talk too much. I have weird music going through my head at all times. And I use these things and the skills from them to be able to gain that scholarship. So I hope that helps.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tanya. That was great. What I'm going to do now, just briefly for 10 minutes, if that's okay, just fire random different questions at people, just to try and answer some of the ones that have not been answered in the chat box, because I'm sure you all want to go, and I know that we've been here a while. So the first question is, I'll go to Michelle, if that's okay, is how did you structure your answers? Did you use bullet points? Did you use full prose in your application form?
I think because for me it was a long time ago now, because obviously I'm a part-timer, so I'm on my second year. But I think in my application, what I used, what I said before, really, the STAR method. I used the situation, task. What was the other one? Action and result. I did use that. And also what my GDL public law teacher told me is really good. He said to me to just always put an example, kind of what everyone else has touched on, just whatever you've done, the most important thing to remember is just to put an example of what you've done. Don't just say, okay, I'm great at being a barrister because I can advocate, or I can, you know, or whatever. Like, try and say a good example of when you've done it. And oh, someone. Yeah.
Eugenia, can you please put yourself on mute?
I think she's forgotten there.
I can't find him. I can't find him on the list.
Yeah, Paige, you should have.
Oh, he's here now. I've got him. I've found him. Sorry, I was trying to scroll down. Done it. Thank you.
There you go.
Sorry.
But yeah, no, it's fine, because that's the joys of being online. I was online all year for a year, so everyone was either on mute or you could hear everybody's whole life in the back. But you know what? At the end of the day, I honestly just say, luckily I haven't got my daughter here today. She's at her grandma's, but like, honestly, just say it's about, I structured it in a way of the STAR method, as I said earlier, or I put the actual, you know, I explained, okay, I'm great at advocating on behalf of whatever, you know, people, because for example, in a circumstance, I did this in my high school or whatever, and I set up a petition to get rid of a teacher because they were rubbish, right? So then after, we literally, you know, then I'll make an example. Obviously, don't phrase it in that way, but I'm just paraphrasing here, right? And then I literally put, you know, the result of what happened in the outcome, because they always want to know examples. They always want to see how you've done things, and just explain it and structure it properly, really. But I do always go back to the STAR procedure, and they always say that in our bar course as well at City. Whenever you're doing an application, look at the STAR methodology, and that really helps.
I find bullet points don't give you the ability to demonstrate written advocacy very much. That's all I would add to that, is that bullet points take away your ability to demonstrate your written advocacy. It's just a list then, and the list isn't written advocacy.
And I would echo as well what Rhys said in terms of, you know, we use bullet points more for, well, now I'm doing the bar, more for things like submissions or skeleton arguments or something like that. So it's like the bare minimum. Maybe use the bullet points when you're, I think, when you're in your interview and you just want to quickly glance down, but don't, you know, look and read a script or anything. And I think Mr. Nela said that earlier when he said, you know, he was just free talking when he had his interview and he didn't really use a script. It's not good to use a script. I just think, look, maybe if you really want to write a script, write it before and then read it before, but then do not look at it in your interview, because they will be able to tell, and you'll sound really robotic, and you know, it won't really help you. So yeah, I personally didn't use bullet points in my application. I just wrote like 3 little short paragraphs, and one experience was there, the second experience was there, and the third experience was there. And don't write too much. That's enough. Thank you.
Can I add?
Thank you.
Paige, am I right to just add to that? And this is just another example of how things differ between everybody, because I actually did use bullet points in my application, and this is another example of there's no right way necessarily. There isn't a right recipe to be able to get a scholarship. It is just a combination of things. So in my in the questions that ask for specific qualities, I didn't use bullet points there, I did prose. However, in questions such as my academic achievements, interests and activities, in that, what I did is I actually did subcategories. So the application form for grades is a little bit messy. I don't particularly like it. I basically changed the whole application form to suit what I wanted to get out of it. So under the academic achievements, interests and activities, I put subheadings: positions of responsibility, advocacy, mini pupilages, and then other. And then what I did was I bullet pointed the dates from and to, and what I did during those dates under those subheadings. And that was something that I found beneficial, particularly if you have more experiences that you would like to get in that you might not be able to get in anywhere else in your application form. So just make sure that you do maximise the form to the best of your ability and to suit your experiences. And just a reminder that there is no right way.
Brilliant, thank you. And Emily, if you're still on, I can't see anybody at the moment, but there's a question which asks, if you're talking about adversity that you've faced, how personal should you be with that?
I think in my view, it's just about being as personal as you want to be, share whatever you're comfortable with sharing. And yeah, I don't really think there's anything more to say. I think it's just about whatever you want to share and whatever question they're asking, how much you think needs to be shared to get whatever point you're making across.
I would say as well, though, adding to that, because I don't know, it's up to you, but try not to, you can overshare, right? Like you can, like example, you know, this is really delicate subjects or things, but say if you had a baby, you know, been there, done that, you can overshare, right? And no one wants to hear the whole experience of everything all the time. But I mean, when I had my personally, when I, you know, my experience was when I started out in my GDL, before my GDL, when I did the undergraduate, I also, you know, went through quite a bit of adversity. And for me, I was in a car accident and I broke my back. This was back in 2005. And when I broke my back, I couldn't walk for 2 years. So I had to learn to walk again. And they said that I would probably never walk again, example. So like I overshared to a point, but it's remaining calm as well when you're saying it and not getting, because obviously we are human beings, we are emotional, but not getting too emotional to the point where you're sobbing and your tears are coming out, you know, that's too much, it's oversharing. But if you can show them how you got through that, how strong you were after going through that, and the support, you know, that you gained from that, and the support you had within yourself as well, because you're going to come across cases which are very emotional, especially if you're going to be in criminal and or family law or so on, and in the humanitarian areas. So, and you can't be breaking down in front of the judge like crying, you know, it's just not going to work. You're going to be professionally embarrassed. So but I'm not saying to minimize what has happened to you, but just kind of find a healthy balance of where you can express it, say how you've come through it, and how it makes you a better advocate and a better barrister for the future. So yeah,
I think that's exactly it. I mean, it's about if it illustrates your point, like so many other answers, then of course use it. I mean, I went into the fact that I've been a victim of attempted murder and my experience in the court and how incredibly disjointed all the factions of it are, and how that made me want to learn more about it and how it worked. But if you don't feel you can discuss it without it becoming very emotional and difficult, it's probably best to then take a step back from it.
Adversity was a really important part of my application form as a disabled person, and if you remember, my grades were quite well. I didn't have any qualifications for a long time, and my grades in my undergraduate were quite bad. So it was really important for me to, in the section where in the extenuating circumstances section, for me to sell myself in the right way, sell my extenuating circumstances or adversity or wherever you put it in the right way. And I had a bit of guidance on this from a barrister who was at one point on the scholarship panel, which I'll share with you now, and it kind of echoes what the other panelists have been saying, but it's basically you want to spin the adversity in with a positive vibe. So. And because positive energy is what you want to absolutely emanate from your application. You just want positivity to come from it. So when I had written my adversity, my extenuating circumstances, I had been very frank. I had said that I had epilepsy and I was in full-time care and and I just laid down the facts. But I didn't spin a positive edge to it. I just laid down the facts and it was what it was. The advice was to then just add the little bit that my 2-2, considering I did it while I was in full-time care, I was completely bedbound while I was doing it, is in fact one of my greatest achievements. It's not just a 2-2, it's not actually a failure. It's even better than me now getting a distinction in my LLM, because it was done whilst I was in adversity. I was suffering significant adversity. So keep it short, keep it concise. Remember, and I keep banging on about it, but remember, this is an exercise in written advocacy, and the section on adversary is another part of that. And you want to send a positive message about any adversary that you have experienced in your time, and don't shy away from it. Just make sure that it feels good for the person who's reading it to read it. Make sure that they feel happy when they've finished reading that section, because they want to feel happy. They don't want to finish reading it and feel gloomy about what's happened, even if it has been gloomy. Make sure they feel happy and they think, wow, that's a good story and that's a wholesome story, you know.
Brilliant, thanks, Rhys. What I will also say just before I ask the final question as well is just be a little bit wary in that box of, for example, suppose you get a 2-1 and you really wanted a first, and you're going to say that that's really bad that you got a 2-1 because X, Y, Z reason, i.e. the pandemic, for example. You got a 2-1 because of the pandemic, but you really wanted a first. I would be a little bit wary of doing that unless you've been really affected by COVID, just because the panelists may have got a 2-1 and they might be really proud of their 2-1, and you acting like a 2-1's not very good might not put you on the best footing. So just be wary of that if you're going to do that. Obviously, if there's a really, valid reason why you didn't get a first or whatever it might be, then you can put that on there. But just be cautious if you're going to go down that route. And the final question is, and I'll go to Poppy and then Musa, if that's okay, is people have asked about the advocacy exercise. So first of all, what was the advocacy exercise that you had to do at Lincoln's, Poppy?
They don't have one. It's just your section in the interview speaking on a subject area of your choice. And yeah, like I said, mine sort of ran that I actually didn't just get to speak. As soon as I told them my topic of interest, they were straight away asking me questions about it. To answer a question that was in the chat earlier about what kind of questions they asked me, it was about the law of that area. It was about my opinions. They would throw hypothetical scenarios at me and ask me like topical questions about it. It wasn't necessarily getting me to name legislation or case studies about it or anything like that. So yeah, they quizzed me straight away just about an area, and it was how I could deal with that.
And what was the advocacy exercise at Middle?
Thank you, Paige. I mean, before that, can I just touch on one point that I wanted to extend and just an advice to everyone that is applying. Show them how amazing you are. Don't be afraid to show that you have big goals you want to achieve. I mean, you have to show them self-belief, courage, and you have the integrity and resilience to be a barrister. Just with myself, it had come in the application that in a few years I will stand up as an MP, and being a barrister is not where I aim. and they were like questioning, and I was like, in future I will be the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. And they were like, this guy just got granted asylum seeker, he didn't even had rights to live in this country, and he was about to be deported, and I want to be the Prime Minister of UK. And there was like, is there anything else? And they thought that I'm gonna say no, and I was like, yes, there are two things. One, I want the Queen Scholarship because that's the highest one, and two, I want a mentor. And they were like, we just wanted to end the session. And they asked me why, and I was like, money is temporary. But telling them that I have received the received the Queen Scholarship from the Middle Temple is another thing that you can put it as a pride, like Laurie that have received her. And I was like, it's up to the Middle Temple if they want to give it or not, but I will ask. And also I was like, I want a mentor, and I want you to select me a mentor that you know is going to help me to achieve these things. I don't just need someone that is going to agree with me and say, great. I want someone that disagrees through everything with me. And yeah, that's I was like, inside me I was sweating. I mean, when I took out my shirt, it was actually sweating so much, but like from outside I was like just talking like I have no feelings, I'm dead inside, and I know what I'm doing. About the advocacy exercise, we didn't had one, but they kept asking about, would you represent the Home Office? Would you be able to say to someone that you have to you will be deported, because that's the kind of level that you want to deal with? And if your answer is no, they will say that you don't have what it takes, you don't have the stamina to stand up as a barrister, you are just one-sided, and you cannot be one-sided. As Rhys say, you prepare for one, but you have to prepare both sides. If you are doing an exercise, think of it, you will be a prosecutor and a defender. You have to look at both sides. You are prosecuting, but also what the defendant is doing. You have to look at it from both sides. Otherwise, I mean, you may get a scholarship, but if you don't show that you think on your feet, you will not get it. It's that. Thank you.
Brilliant. That is very, very encouraging, Musa. So thanks for sharing. What we're going to do, guys, is I'm going to end it there because we've ran over significantly. Welcome to the world of the bar. Everybody loves speaking too much. Get used to it. What I will say is that I know that all of the panelists are really lovely. So I'm sure that they are more than happy for you to connect with them on LinkedIn. I'm sure most of you already have me on LinkedIn, otherwise you probably wouldn't be on this. So if you don't know anybody's name or you want their LinkedIn contacts, then just get in touch with me. I am so grateful to all the panelists for giving your time this evening and for sharing the application process that you all went through. And I'm sure that everybody else is very grateful. Don't give up, everybody. Keep applying for everything that's in front of you. Don't think that you cannot do something, because you absolutely can. I hope that you've seen a wide variety of panelists tonight. It seems like everybody's got a great story to tell in some way or another, and that wasn't even supposed to happen. It's just coincidental. So you know, I'm sure that you're all inspired, and please keep going. Apply for a scholarship. Even if you don't get one, there are other ways to get it, i.e. funding that we've spoken about. So please don't be put off. And if you need anything, then just get in touch with either myself or the other panelists. But thanks, guys. It's been great.
Thank you, Paige, for hosting it.
No problem at all.
Yeah, thanks for organising, Paige.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.